So everyone, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm not gonna lie, this is my very second time presenting actually anything in front of so many people, so kind of feeling the challenge in my body. Thank you, thank you. And however, my presentation today is not about the stress, even though I am a psychologist by education. I want to tell you about my case study in which I applied so much hyped Gen AI, or I prefer to call it by its name. So more precisely, it's large language models, or LLMs for short. And I use them for qualitative data analysis. And hopefully, at the end of this presentation, I'll be able to provide you some evidence that you can actually start building trust in this technology, rather than just rely on AI's magic. Once again, my name is Jakub Serek. I currently work as a quant researcher at Silky Coders for LPP Group in the fashion industry. And before I tell you all the steps in my project and in my process, I would like to say a big thank you to my whole research team for all the help with this project, especially Agata Bleichert. Without her, this automation process wouldn't be actually possible. So let me start with effects that we achieved. First, in terms of efficiency, we were able to speed our qualitative data analysis process around 250 times at this stage of reading and actually analyzing text data, compared to manual work of human researchers. And thanks to this, in a yearly perspective, we were able to gain around 50,000 Polish zloty. And I'm describing this as a gain rather than a saving, because until this moment, we were actually unable to analyze all the data we were collecting. And this is only for a single project like this. We have 5 or 6 similar to this one. And last but definitely not least, our quality achievement. We got to around 95% of validity. Without this one, the other two would be actually meaningless. So now you may ask a question, how did I do it? Maybe with some kind of magic. Actually, not really. I tried to approach this problem with an engineer-like or researcher-like mindset, trying to build my solution step by step. And before I tell you all the steps I went through, it will be only fair to you if I first explain all the buzzwords that I've already started to use. So, for the purpose of this presentation and to simplify all the possible paradigms of interacting with LLMs, I selected only 2. The first one is believing in AI's magic, which for me is characterized by using this technology mostly for ad hoc or exploratory problems, usually poorly defining our knowledge context, our expectations, our style of analysis inside prompts, but in the end, still kind of expecting high quality, high validity results from models. On the other side, we have an approach on which I focus much more today, and it's building trust in AI. Especially this is useful if you want to use or build AI solution that will take over some part of your job, hopefully this boring and creative, slow to carry out part of your job. And it's about setting up goals, setting up metrics, evaluating both my work as a developer as well as outputs or work of LLMs. And the first paradigm for me is mostly great for speed, but not so great for quality in long runs. You definitely experience that sometimes AI's outputs are great to your questions, sometimes they don't. And building trust in AI, I think, combines quality and speed in long runs. However, of course, you need to spend time developing such solutions, so it initially is much, much slower. And to be perfectly honest with you, you can actually combine these 2 paradigms, because if you are trying to build trust in your AI solution, you'll still face some problems or obstacles during the development cycle, for which you can actually at least try to use AI's magic to give you some ideas on how to solve those problems, and possibly it will solve them for you. So now I can actually present you all the steps I went through, and I need to start with the study context and our goal. So the goal was to automate our qualitative data analysis of a text data coming from a post-purchase survey. When our customers buy some products, they receive an email survey, which contains mostly quantitative questions, but there is a single open-ended comment section in which our customers share with us their pain points, their blockers, their motivations. Sometimes they even say a few good words about us, so apparently we are doing at least a few things right. And for me, this is a type of study which I like to call continuous monitoring, continuous discovery, stealing a little bit from Teresa Torres and DevOps guys. And with the data we are collecting here, there are associated 3 challenges. The first one is that we are sending this survey to customers of 3 different brands, Sensei, Mojito, and Reserved. And even though the survey itself is basically the same, we still need to include the context of each brand into our analysis. Second challenge is that we are sending this survey in 19 different languages. So you can imagine that until this moment, there was a lot of translations going on, and they were either of a poor quality, or we had to spend a lot of time or money trying to get high quality translations. And LLMs deal with different languages with great ease. Last challenge is that in a yearly perspective, we are collecting around 20,000 comments from so-called critics or negative comments. And we focus on negative comments only at that moment because they contain the most insight or actionable knowledge for us. And based on my estimations, we would need to actually hire almost a full-time job researcher in order to take care of this whole study from end to end, so from downloading, processing, analyzing, and then reporting this data. So quite a lot of work. And we have a solution for this goal and for our challenges. We wanted to hire, and we did hire LLMs to do text classification jobs using so-called content analysis with previously discovered patterns or categories or themes of issues. As I mentioned at the very beginning, without Agata, this automation process wouldn't be actually possible because she had a lot of experience previously analyzing this data set, and she previously discovered high-level themes. And my job was to properly define those themes and then instruct models on how to use them, so how to do our style of analysis. And now I'll jump a little bit aside to more technical part of how we can actually interact with large language models. And also to be consistent with the paradigms I just described to you, I again selected only 2 approaches of interacting with LLMs. The first one is via graphical user interfaces, so all your popular chats provided by all the big and smaller players. And the second approach is using API, so sending direct requests to some models located usually on some cloud services via some programming languages. The first approach is definitely bridges the gap between typical user and the technology itself. It provides mostly an easy access. Also, it's usually intuitive and allows for fast explorations. Different providers give us different additional product features that expand capabilities and possibilities of this technology. And what's most important here, you don't need to set up any programming environment. However, besides using LLMs in this project, we wanted to also use classical programming to build scaffolding around it in order to also process, clean the data, and at the end visualize it. So we also need to use classical programming. That's why I choose API, but this is not the only reason. I also choose API because it allows you for very high control over LLMs. It allows you to set up separately system prompts and user prompts, and also tweak parameters like top P or temperature if you need them to. And also, what's most important here, it enables you to run high-quality evaluations so you can check if you are going into the right direction and how fast you are making your progress. And very briefly, for those interested, my tech stack, I use Python as a programming language, OpenAI's LLMs via Azure Cloud, and the prompt for open source library. So that's a good combination of tools. And now we can actually start building the trust part. Before I tell you the technical aspects of building trust, let me one last time highlight why actually trust is all you need. And for that, I will use the quote from Dario Amodei, who is the CEO of Anthropic Company, one of the key players on the AI market. And during the podcast with Lex Friedman, he said something like this. AI systems are quite unpredictable. It is really difficult to control their behavior in a broad spectrum of tasks. You definitely heard before that models are non-deterministic, and you definitely experience that even with a simple prompt, you sometimes get slightly or very different results using exactly the same prompt. And that's no good for research work or for a researcher role. Because in my opinion, the ultimate goal of a research is to provide high-quality, actionable knowledge that will allow stakeholders to lower risk associated with some decision-making. And if we cannot trust the outcome of LLMs, and basically we don't know if the outcome is good or not, by default, I think it's fair to assume that instead of reducing risks, we are actually increasing them, just because we don't know. And in order to gain this knowledge, if LLMs work as we intended them to do, we need to evaluate their work and our progress during the development cycle. And to do that, we need to use evaluations. So that we are on the same page. This is a very brief and simple explanation, definition of what evaluations are. And they are tools that help us efficiently and systematically measure progress towards our prompting goals, or in a broader sense, our project goals. There are many, many different techniques of evaluations and different approaches depending on your end goal and complexity of the solution you are working with. This presentation is by no means in-depth about evaluations, but I highly encourage you to get into this topic because it's getting more and more heat in the AI space. Okay, so now we know why we are building the trust. We know what are evaluations. We can start doing our project, and what's the better place to start than setting up goals and choosing right metrics. And actually, I've already told you about the goal, but let me repeat it once again so that it's perfectly clear for all of you. The goal was to classify problems hidden in a survey comments from a post-purchase type of study using our previously discovered patterns or themes of issues, so using our style of analysis. And because we were using our style of analysis, our primary quality metric was validity, or you can also call it accuracy. So we were comparing outputs of LLMs to outputs of our work in test datasets, and that's how we were able to calculate the final quality metric. However, what should we do in a situation where some combination of prompts and models give us very similar quality score? Then we need a secondary metric that will help us decide which solution is actually better for us. And as per usual in the business environment, we need to care about costs. So we are also calculating costs of different models and prompts. And if some combination of prompts and models gave us very similar quality score, we were picking basically the cheaper one. And in order to run evaluations, we also need, in this type of project, test data sets. They are carefully selected subset of our data consisting of examples that will help us actually run such evaluations. In the end, they look like your typical Excel or CSV table. There are a few columns for the context, and the last column called themes here contains outputs of our work, so our type or our style of classifying each comment, to which we were then comparing outputs of LLM. And when you are trying to prepare such test data sets, you need to consider 3 parameters. One of them is size. If you have too small data sets, your evaluations will be of low quality. If you have too big data sets, you'll need to spend more time and money evaluating them. So I used a suggested rule of thumb to have 100 examples. I had 100 examples for each language because I wanted to make sure that across different languages, my quality score is very similar. Second thing is representativeness. You want to adequately reflect the issues of previously defined categories or themes. And it's also nice to have to reflect the frequency of occurrence of those problems. But you have to have experience with analyzing this data set to do so. So it's not a must-have. It's nice to have if you have this experience. And last parameter, diversity. Highly related to representativeness. You want to include all categories of previously defined issues. And what's most interesting for me, you also want to include so-called edge cases or contentious cases. These are comments or parts of comments that during the text classifications ends up between 2 or 3 categories. Because when you are trying to polish out your prompts and to gain a last few percentage points on your quality metric, it usually ends up with figuring out how to properly instruct models on, to deal with such edge cases. Great, so we have goals, we have metrics, we have test data sets. We're very prepared to start actually the fun part, which is prompting or prompt engineering. And I'm not going to tell you what a prompt is, you already know that, but let me highlight a huge advantage that I see for researchers or other folks that do a research type of work when building high quality or production level prompts like this. And the advantage is that Basically, what you need to do is to very clearly write down and specify your expectations, your knowledge context, your output structure. So in the end, you have to build high-quality documentation that will be understandable and actionable by models. And once you build it for models, other people will understand it too. So actually, you can share it with other colleagues or stakeholders so that they can understand your thought process and style of analysis if they need to do so. And I don't know about you, but basically I've never had time to do high-quality documentation or actually any documentation for my qualitative data analysis. So I think that's a big opportunity here. And the whole process of building high-quality prompts is it's iterative, it's very empirical. I would say it's very research-like. That's why it felt so familiar to me. And I think that's why I really like it, because it's usually start with a prompt or a hypothesis in the form of a single prompt. You send this prompt to some models to collect outputs, so you are collecting data, and then you are running this collected data through your evaluations to compare outputs of LLMs to outputs of our previous work in test data sets. So basically, what you do here is data analysis. And after running data analysis, you need to make inferences and ask different questions. Why models were successful in some, categorizing some comments, why they failed in others. So we are trying to come up with different hypotheses for different prompts, and you go in circle iteratively until you find your optimal or perfect solution. And now I'll show you a few of my iterations. By no means they are all I went through, but I'll focus on those most interesting and relatable to the end goal of this project. We need to start with the basic prompt structure, which will be repeated in another examples. And I think it's fair to call it a zero-shot prompt, but I'll explain in a moment what I mean by that. The basic prompt structure started with specifying the role. I asked models to act as senior qualitative researchers with experience in the fashion industry. Next was the task context, that models will be provided with text comment coming from a post-purchase survey, and we are focusing here only on negative comments or negative parts of comments. Then we have a task goal to categorize comments according to the list of provided categories. Here is a list of categories, and actually it's right now it's a list of names of categories. That's why I think it's fair to call it a zero-shot prompt, because I'm not giving any examples or definitions on how to use these categories. After categories, we have a simple guideline that a single comment may fall into multiple categories. And then what's very important here is that we inserting a single comment into a single request or a single prompt. So each text or each comment is analyzed separately, and models don't have memory or are not biased by their previous analysis. And at the end is my try to enforce the output structure. And I don't know if you can see this, but I was yelling at models using caps lock because they were providing me with digits in front of categories names, and I wanted only categories names. And definitely there are better ways to enforce output structure right now, and on my production solution, I'm using more programmatic ways to enforce this output structure. Next step from the zero-shot prompt is something what I called here a simple few-shot. Basically, for each category, I wrote down a simple definition and a few bullet points on, with examples on when to use each category. And mostly, I was comparing two models, GPT-4o and GPT-4o mini. And on the validity metric between these two models and between these two prompts I just showed you, for zero-shot prompt, I got to around 72% validity for the mini model and to around 70% for GPT-4o. In terms of the simple few-shot, I was about 90% equally between these two models. Another technique that I want to show you today is something that is also probably familiar to you. It's called chain of thought. Basically, it's a technique in which you ask model to think step by step on how to solve a problem before actually trying to solve it. And I was asking models something like this, to think about what negative things did the customer say in a comment, what are the main problems, what are the secondary problems, why this customer could possibly become a critic. And in terms of the accuracy or validity score, I was actually unable to get the highest possible results, because with the GPT-4o model, I got to around 92%, and with the mini model to around 85%. However, I think this is a great technique to start with doing this type of project, because if you loosen up the output structure and you don't force models to output only categories names, but also to output so-called thinking tokens, you'll see how they understand the request inside prompt and how they understand data that you are sending to them. And that allowed me at a certain stage to much quicker iterate on my other ideas and improve my prompt in a much faster way. And the final solution I was able to figure out was a prompt that I called here an extended few shot. Basically, for each category, I provided a sufficient number of examples, both positive and negative examples. And by positive examples, I mean telling models on when to use each category, and by negative ones, I mean telling models when not to use each category. And in terms of the validity score, for the mini model, I was around 86%, and for the GPT-4o model, I was around 95%. So, to sum up my prompting journey, the simplicity was actually the key here, because relatively simple a few-shot prompting technique gave me the best result. What I had to do was to enhance each category with sufficient number of both positive and negative examples. And in terms of these two models I was showing you, the GPT-4o was much better. And actually, my only explanation why is that it has more compute power and it has more parameters. But if someone has a better explanation, I'll be more than happy to hear it. And at the very end of my presentation, I would like to share with you my 3 tips on how could you approach something similar in your work. You need to start with choosing the right problem. In my opinion, the right problem is the one that, from a human perspective, is first and foremost simple. And then it's also good if it's slow to carry out and you have to repeat it very often, because then your ROI will be the highest. But start with a simple problem. If you choose a difficult exploratory problem, it will be very, very hard to properly define and specify your expected outcome of LLMs, and they basically won't know how to actually do the job according to your expectations. So start simple. Second thing here is don't be afraid of API. I assume that most of us here are not programmers. I'm not a programmer myself. I know a little bit how to code, but learning the basic way of interacting with LLMs, I think, is also a very good way to at least very slightly try to reduce the FOMO effect associated with AI development. And at the same time, for many of problems that I had to solve in this project, you can actually use AI's magic. This is by no means a very complicated program with thousands or millions lines of codes. And setting up programming environments and building simple code blocks was actually very, very simple. AI won't give you always, the first answer of AI won't always be the best, but you will learn during the development cycle. And last tip from my side is to evaluate, and once again, evaluate. If you want to build a tool or a solution using generative AI that will actually take over this boring, uncreative, slow to carry out part of your job, then you need to be able to trust its end results so that you can actually share them with your stakeholders or colleagues to help lower risk associated with decision making. And in order to do so, you need to check if you're going to the right direction and how fast are you going there. Thank you very much for listening and joining my presentation.
Thank you, Jakub, for all those insights. Now we have the floor for all your questions. Kasia is here with the mic, so if you have a question, raise your hand.
Hello. I wanted to ask about the rule of thumb you mentioned about having 100 tests, let's say, examples per language. How did you come up with the number? Was it statistically confirmed? Because normally when you want to achieve some statistical accuracy, you go on with a statistical model, then you just go with the actual number, and then there's a representation and so on. Did you carry out it that way, or was it rather just experimentation?
So actually, that was much, much simpler. I was doing a course by Anthropic, and they had a recommendation to use 100 examples to start with. And at some time, I saw that 100 examples for each language is actually enough to improve my prompts. But then I decided to use 100 examples for each language. So I didn't carry out any statistical analysis. If that's a sufficient number of examples to compare prompts, I trusted Anthropic engineers that this is a good rule of thumb to start with.
All right, we have a question right there.
Hi, Jakub.
Hey.
Two questions, actually. One is how much time you spent on evaluation, and the second one, could you tell us more about the evaluation process? How many comments you checked? What was the process like of evaluation?
Did I get right how much time I spent developing this?
Yes.
So the initial proof of concept took me around 2 weeks, but I went through like 150 iterations, and I was testing many different prompts before I came to the conclusion that simplicity is the key here, because tested many advanced prompts that didn't give me any good results. So around 2 weeks for building the proof of concept and to achieving this quality result, but I spent more time developing the data engineering pipeline.
Evaluation of the results.
Okay, relations with results. Let me think about it. Still, I think I'm still building this relationship because it's not like a perfect one-time solution. It has its caveats, because when you are enforcing models to classify a set of categories, then possibly in future there will be new categories that we have to consider. So the building trust and building relations, I think it's an ongoing task. I have more than a month of experience with analyzing this data, so I'm not sure if that answers your question perfectly, but we can try to discuss it later on. I think I spent a month analyzing this data and showing it to other people. And if you could repeat the second question.
You know what? I'll talk to you later.
Okay, great.
We have a question right there. Yep.
Okay, maybe I have a follow-up question. What are the next steps? Are you gonna, is it going to production? How? And how do you see the future of this solution?
How do I see the future of the relation with this data?
No, how do you see, tell us about the business application of this. Is it going to production? Are you going to use it actually to classify the data?
Got it. So a lot of people, both from business and product in our company, use this text data come from NPS survey. So the first question is actually to the NPS score, and this is a follow-up to the NPS score. And a lot of folks use this in our company, the NPS metric, for monitoring different aspects of our business, in this case, the post-purchase satisfaction. And we use this text data to see what are the most important problems, to just monitor how our clients are complaining or saying things about us. So there's a lot of high adoption of this data in our company. It was before I started automating it. The problem is that we have many different departments in different countries, and many of them was actually unable to use it because we were able to carry out this whole data analysis process only for 1 or 2 markets. So this was to increase the adoption and allow other departments from other countries to also use this data to monitor the post-purchase satisfaction of our customers.
Do we have any more? Okay, there is a question.
Hi, first of all, thank you for sharing your process. That was super interesting. Actually, I have 2 questions. So question number 1, your data was already, you had a way to pre-categorize the data, right? Do you keep room for new categories emerging over time? And if so, how do you do it? That's question number one. Question number two, so this is NPS open-ended question, so the data is relatively low complexity. Do you have any tips on how to get started analyzing a bit more complex qualitative data?
Okay, great questions. Trying to answer the first one. That's difficult because basically I would need to, and I will have to spend time with this data more and more, and to also sometimes read comments myself to see if there are any other patterns emerging. There is no like an automated solution, at least for now, to spot new categories or new issues in this data set. And this is also, I think, connected to your second question, because that would require using LLMs for exploratory type of analysis, which definitely many of us have tried to use ChatGPTs, Geminis for exploratory data analysis, but the quality of such solutions is actually unknown. That's the problem. It's very difficult to build metrics to measure exploratory problems. It's not impossible. There are different techniques, and I'm trying to build such solution, but I don't have any good results for now. So very difficult task right now because it's exploratory problem. That's why I also suggested to start simply. And I would like to build some quality metric for exploratory problems, but for now, none of them was good enough for me.
I was wondering if you maybe monitor if the other category gets bigger and bigger over time, if there was a way to, at least monitor it some way, if your classification is not getting outdated over time.
Got it. So yeah, we have like the whole pipeline, and the end result for stakeholders is a dashboard. So you can monitor change over time as well, and compare different brands and different markets as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question, if there is one. All right. No volunteers for now. Thank you so much. Give it up once again. Oh, there was a question?
There was a question.
I'm so sorry, but yeah.
Okay, so one last question. How do you feel about the fact that, this whole workflow, right, is based on a model that's being outsourced to a different company? And as you said, it performs differently on different models, right? How do you plan for situations a company shuts down a version of a model at some point that was the best performing one, for example?
That's a big problem, yeah. Fortunately, I have prepared my test data sets, so I can run evaluations for different models. So in a time where OpenAI will shut GPT-4o, I will have to switch to other models that will be available, because we have to use Azure Cloud in our company, and to match European Union regulations, there are not all models available on Azure Cloud, and my set of different models is actually quite small. But what I will have to do is to switch to different model, run through my all evaluations, check if I'm getting similar quality score. If so, then I can just plug in the new model, and that's good. If not, I will have to think about new prompts or other techniques to improve this quality. So yeah, this definitely will come in this project, because at some point they definitely will switch off the GPT-4o.